My name is Emily Dawson. I have 33 years. I'm a nurse at a hospital in Austin, Texas. I'm Clara's mother, a 7-year-old girl who is, literally, the love of my life. And I died. I'm not saying this metaphorically. I really died. Clinically. My heart stopped. And what I experienced in the next few minutes changed everything I thought about life, about death, and about what happens after. But to tell you this, I need to take you back to that day. It was an ordinary Tuesday. Hot as always. I left home late for my second shift at the hospital after dropping Clara off at school. She was exhausted, with her hair hastily tied up and a bottle of cold coffee in the cup holder. Life, as always, happening on autopilot. I remember stopping at a red light on 6th Street. I looked at the sky for a moment. It was such a beautiful blue. And I thought, is that all it is? This routine, this tiredness, this endless running? It wasn't a bitter question. It was just a sincere doubt. I never imagined that, minutes later, everything would change. The sound of screeching tires. A flash. An impact that seemed to explode time. Everything was silent, as if someone had pressed the mute button on reality. The first thing I noticed was the silence, then the lightness, and then I saw myself. Yes, I saw myself, outside the car, floating. My body was trapped in the driver's seat, my face covered in blood, but my conscience was alive, awake, observing everything from above. It was as if I had disconnected from myself, and at the same time I was more aware than ever. The sirens arrived. The paramedics were running, shouting. "No pulse," I heard one of them say. "We're going to lose her," another replied. And me, I only thought about Clara. Will she know that I loved her? That she was everything to me? I tried to scream. I tried to move, but it was as if I were in another dimension, where everything is seen, felt, but not touched. That's when something happened. A light, soft, began to emerge. She wasn't exactly a light, more like a presence, a warmth that attracted me. And deep within my being, a question echoed. If this is death, then why does everything here feel so alive? I don't know exactly when it happened. At some point, in the midst of the chaos, my body gave up. The sound of the defibrillator, the screams of the paramedics, everything was left behind. Time, which used to flow like a raging river, stopped. And then silence came. But it was no ordinary silence. It was a silence that filled everything, a kind of peace that bordered on the indescribable. I didn't feel afraid, no pain. The only sensation was one of weightlessness, as if I were floating in the air. The first thing I noticed was the fact that I was still conscious. I thought, I felt, I had memories, emotions, awareness of myself. But my body wasn't there with me. I looked down and saw the scene at the hospital. Doctors running, screams, my clothes being cut off, someone putting defibrillator pads on my chest. My face was pale, my lips blue, and yet I wasn't that one there. I was floating near the ceiling, seeing everything with impossible clarity. I could hear thoughts, feel emotions. It was as if I had become part of everything around me, but without being part of anything. One of the paramedics murmured, "It's been 5 minutes," and it hit me like an invisible punch. 5 minutes. 5 minutes without heartbeat. 5 minutes in which, theoretically, my brain should already be shutting down. But I've never been so awake. I felt someone pulling me, not physically, but spiritually. It was as if a presence was there with me, invisible, but undeniable. A love, immense, overwhelming, impossible to contain. And that's when I saw him. A figure began to form in front of me. It had no visible face, but it was pure light, pure peace, pure truth. My heart, if I can still call it that, you knew who it was. It was Jesus. There was no doubt. I didn't see images, crosses, crowns. I heard no harps or heavenly voices. But what I felt at that moment was him. He didn't say welcome to me. He didn't hug me. He didn't even judge me. He just looked at me, or rather, felt me, and said, "It's not over yet." Those 3 words vibrated inside me like calm thunder, and with them, something changed. The surrounding light began to pulse as if breathing, and then a kind of path began to form before me, a corridor made of light, but also of memories, feelings, moments. I understood without words that this was not the end. It was the beginning of something I could never imagine. And in that place, where time doesn't exist, where pain doesn't reach, where the body no longer limits, I began to realize a truth that few know. The soul does not leave immediately. He is, for a reason, for a while, and I was about to find out exactly why. What happened next cannot be measured in minutes or seconds, because there, time doesn't flow like it does here. It does not exist as we know it. It's as if everything is happening at the same time, past, present, and even what hasn't even arrived yet. The corridor of light before me was not made of walls. It was made of memories, sensations, and fragments of everything that shaped me. As I moved forward, or was pulled along, I don't know, I saw scenes from my childhood passing by like reflections in jellyfish. My mother's smile pushing me on the playground swing, my first day of school, my father putting a little star on the Christmas tree, the first time Clara said, "Mommy." Everything felt so real that I wanted to touch it, but he couldn't. It was as if I were immersed in a living memory, and each step took me deeper into myself. And then he appeared again. The same light, the same presence, now closer, more intense. I didn't see eyes, but he saw me completely. And even without hearing a word, I understood everything. Jesus was there, walking with me. He didn't lead me. He accompanied me, as if to say, "I'm here. You're not alone." At a certain point, I stopped. Something inside me hesitated. Ahead, the corridor widened, transforming into an open, wide space, made of light, but also of truth. I felt a kind of invitation, but also an invisible barrier, as if I still couldn't cross it. It was then that, for the first time, he spoke again, with a voice that wasn't sound, but that vibrated within my essence. He said, "You didn't die by chance, and you won't come back by chance either." I remained silent, trying to understand. I had died. There was no doubt about that. But what now? I was there. But for what? Jesus looked at me, or rather, looked within me, and said something I will never forget. Souls don't leave Earth immediately. They stay. And the time they stay depends on what they still need to see. I felt that truth pass through me like a ray of light. I didn't know this was possible. I was always told that the soul leaves the body and goes away. Heaven, hell, judgment, peace. But no one ever talked about this in between. Jesus showed me a kind of vision. It was like a timeline, but spiritual. In it, several souls appeared close to Earth for days, sometimes weeks, until they completed something they had left unfinished. Some attended their wakes, others visited loved ones, others lost, did not understand that they had already left. That's when he said something even more impactful. The love you left, and the wounds too. All of this still holds you back. And at that moment I understood. I wasn't ready to move on yet. There were ties. There were unresolved stories. There was pain that I had caused without realizing it, and also love that I hadn't expressed. Jesus stretched out his hand. Not literally. It was a spiritual, profound gesture. And he said, "Come on, you need to see it." And so, with my heart trembling within an existence that was no longer flesh, I began the most intense and transformative journey of my soul. It wasn't a walk. It was an emotional journey. Jesus took me, or rather, guided me, through places that seemed ordinary at first glance, but that carried deep marks on my life. Each space, each memory, was like an open page that I had never read carefully, and now, without body, without distractions, without ego. I saw everything with eternal eyes. The first stop was the house where I grew up, the old balcony where my father and I used to look at the stars. I could smell the wood, the cold of the night, and hear his laugh like a distant echo. But now, alongside the beauty of that memory, there was also the pain of when he passed away, and the silence that remained between us before the end. I never said what I needed. I never said thank you properly. I never asked for forgiveness. Then I saw the school where I spent years feeling invisible, the colleagues I ignored, the girl who was crying in the bathroom and who I knew was being bullied. And I didn't do anything. That hurt. Not as a punishment, but as an expanded consciousness. I wee how much each small omission had spiritual weight. Not because someone judged me, but because I now saw clearly. Jesus then showed me a kind of clock. It didn't have pointers, but cycles. Each turn represented a soul journey, and in it, the time on earth after death was different for each person. Some stayed for just a few hours, others days, some up to 40 days, others indefinitely trapped between worlds because they are unable to let go of the pain, the grudge, the attachment. I asked why. Why do some souls stay so long? And he responded with a peace that cut through any doubt. Because love doesn't leave quickly, and neither do regrets. That was when I realized that this stay was not a punishment. It was a mercy, a spiritual time given to us to observe, understand, release, and be freed. I saw a woman who died suddenly and spent days beside her young son, whispering in her dreams, trying to comfort her. I saw a man who never said sorry and now walked invisibly through the streets, watching life go on without him, until he finally understood what he needed to forgive in himself. And I saw it, myself, standing in front of people, places, moments, where my soul was still trapped. Jesus said to me, "You have choices, but first you need to see. The truth is that, after death, not everything ends. For some it is just the beginning of a process, an awakening, and now I was awake. The earth was still calling me. My daughter, my story, my unfinished ones. And I understood with cutting clarity that the soul's time after death is not counted in minutes, but in unspoken truths. It's strange to be so close, and at the same time so absent. I walk the earth like a ghost full of emotions. Not the scary kind, but the kind that feels everything more deeply than you've ever felt in your life. I went to my house, the house where Clara's toys were still scattered around the room, the smell of breakfast still in the air, the clothes folded in the basket waiting for me, except I wasn't there anymore. My mother was crying on the couch, with cell phone in hand, watching the news of the accident, the same one that was already spreading on local websites. She didn't scream, she didn't beg, he just cried silently. A contained, dry cry that hurts more than a scream. I tried to touch her, pull over, do something, but my hand, or what I thought was a hand, passed through the air like smoke. And yet, she shuddered. He ran his hands over his arms as if he had felt a sudden cold. He looked around, and for a second he murmured, "Emily." My heart, if I can call it that, exploded with emotion. She felt it. She felt. I went to Clara's room. She was sleeping with her arms wrapped around my old pajamas. Dreamed. I knew this because I saw a tear slowly running down her face, and even in her sleep she whispered, "Mommy." It was the most beautiful pain I have ever felt. There was no physical pain, but there was an overwhelming longing, a love that grew within me like fire, and that could not be expressed in any way. Then I went to the church where I was baptized at 15 years old. It was empty, just light coming through the stained glass windows, the smell of old wood and silence. I sat, or tried to sit, on the bench where I used to pray, and there I cried. I cried like I've never cried before. Not for me, but for everything I stopped living. To say, to forgive, to be grateful. People think that when we die, we stop feeling. But the truth is that the soul feels more than ever. Jesus appeared again. He didn't say anything this time. It just stayed there, with me, allowing me to see, to feel, to understand. And then he said, "They don't see you, but they feel you." And that was true. I saw the signs, the goosebumps, the dreams, the sudden memories. The soul speaks, even when the mouth can no longer. And you who are watching, have you ever felt like someone who left is still around? If you've ever experienced something like this, a dream, a sign, a strong feeling of presence, tell us in the comments. You can help others understand that they are not alone. Souls feel, and sometimes they stay. After visiting the places that marked my life, I realized that it wasn't time to leave yet. Not because I wanted to stay, but because something inside me needed. Jesus explained to me, with the patience of someone who knows each soul deeply, that there is something like a spiritual time after death. And that time does not follow a human standard. It's not chronological. It's emotional, spiritual, deep. Some souls stay for 7 days, others for 21, some up to 40. It depends not on merit, but on need. I asked, whose need? And he replied, yours, and those you love. That's when he took me to a woman. I didn't know her, but he made me feel everything she felt. She had lost her son in a sudden accident, and every day I sat alone on the porch, with the coffee cooling in my hands, waiting for a signal, any sign, and the sun was there, next to her, trying to be present in every way she could, in the wind, in the smell of the coffee, in the recurring dream in which she heard him say, "Mommy, I'm fine." But she didn't listen, or didn't believe it. It was there that I understood what Jesus wanted to show me. The soul's mission is not always to do. Sometimes it is wait for the other person to feel, be present, silently, intensely. Another time I saw a man, a former alcoholic, who spent 7 days watching his own funeral, not with pride or sadness, but with deep regret. Jesus told me that at that time, the man understood the impact of the words he never asked for forgiveness, and seeing his daughter's pain at her funeral, he finally understood the power of her absence. It was only then that he was able to climb. I began to understand that each soul has a different mission before leaving. Some need comforting, others forgive. Some need to learn something that they couldn't even see in life. And there are also those who do not accept that they died and remain trapped in time that no longer exists, wandering like echoes of themselves. But that wasn't my case. I knew it was gone, and I also knew that I needed to understand why it was still there. Jesus took me back to the night of the accident, but this time, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. I had made a choice at that moment between fighting and letting go, and I had let go, not out of weakness, but out of tiredness of life, of routine, of unspoken pain, of the silent pressures that every mother carries alone. And in that moment of revelation, Jesus spoke with infinite tenderness. Your mission now is to remember who you were and what you can still be. That's when I realized I wasn't there just to understand death. I was there to rediscover life. Have you ever thought about how every small gesture of yours, a look, a word, even silence, can completely change someone's world? I never thought. Never really. But in that place between death and the eternal, I was forced to see. And what I saw, it took me apart. Jesus took me to moments in my own life that I myself had forgotten. Seen so small they seemed insignificant. But there, they gained another proportion. I saw a day when I passed a co-worker, Sarah, without looking at her. She was sitting in the locker room, her eyes red, holding a crumpled envelope in her hands. And me? I just wanted to leave soon. I was exhausted. I didn't even ask if she was okay. At that moment, Jesus made me feel what Sarah felt. Abandonment, loneliness, the desire to disappear. A simple, "Are you okay?" would have changed that day. But I didn't say anything. And now I knew the weight of that silence. In another vision I saw when I took the last clean blanket from the pediatric ward and ignored the request of another nurse who wanted to cover a child. It seemed like a silly decision in the midst of chaos. But there now, I saw that child's mother spending the night trying to warm her son with her own body. These moments were like arrows of consciousness piercing my soul. There was no guilt in the human sense. There was no punishment. But there was truth, and the truth frees, but it also hurts. Jesus then showed me another scene. It was a Sunday afternoon at the market. I was in line with Clara. She must have been around 5 years old. In front of me, a lady dropped coins on the floor. I got down with Clara, and we helped collect it. I had completely forgotten about that. But for that lady, that was a gesture that rekindled her faith in people. She cried in the car. He cried because that day, he had thought about giving up on life. But that simple gesture reminded her that there was still kindness in the world. I then understood a truth that no one taught me in any cult, in any sermon, in any book. Nothing goes unnoticed on the spiritual plane. Nothing is too small. Each act generates a consequence. Every choice spreads waves, for better or worse. Jesus looked at me, and his presence enveloped me like an armless hug. He said, "You're seeing now, not just what you did, but what you know he did." I cried. I cried for the life lived in a hurry, for the love I felt and didn't say, for the thank you swallowed, for the hugs postponed, for the reconciliations that were always delayed. And you, who are listening to my story, how many small gestures have you missed? How many I love yous have you saved? How many forgiveness have you postponed, waiting for the right moment that may never come? I saw, with the eyes of the soul, and I tell you, heaven is not measured in great deeds, but in small loves lived with truth. After seeing what I stopped doing in life, I thought there was nothing that could surprise me anymore. But I was wrong. Jesus took me to a different place, lighter, more serene, as if the air there had memory. And then, without warning, without announcement, he appeared, my father. He was exactly as I remembered in my best dreams. Plaid shirt, unshaven beard, that sideways smile that always appeared when he wanted to hide his emotion. But there, he didn't hide it. "Emily," he said, as if my soul recognized the sound from before time. I ran to him, or at least I tried, and when we touched, I felt something that no words on earth can describe. It wasn't a hug. It was fusion. It was a reunion of essence. I cried, and so does he, but it wasn't a cry of pain. It was relief. It was healing. We stood there in silence for a time that doesn't exist on any clock, and then my father said, "I never stopped seeing you. Not for a day." He said he was with me at college graduation, at Clara's birth, and even on the nights I cried hidden in the bathroom, trying to appear strong for everyone. He was there, always, invisible, but present, and in that moment all the pains of my childhood, the silences, the fights, the lack of him when he was gone, dissolved like dust in the light. But it wasn't over yet. Soon after, another presence approached, and my heart froze. It was Aunt Jenna, my best friend from adolescence. She died of an overdose at 19, and for years I carried the guilt of not having done more. I knew she was sinking, but I was also just a girl, and I didn't know how to help. When our eyes met, fear gripped me, but then she smiled, a smile full of truth, without judgment, and he said, "I never blamed you. It was my choice. But your friendship has kept me alive longer than you know." She showed me the notes I wrote, the afternoons we shared headphones listening to sad music in our room. That had meaning. That was love, even imperfect. And there, in that dimension, where everything is seen with the eyes of the soul, I understood that the reunion is not a prize. It is part of the process. Healing between the living and the dead is possible, because on the spiritual plane, nothing is lost. Everything that is true is found again. Jesus approached once again and said, "You still have things to do. But you needed to remember who's waiting for you on the other side." And I knew, when my time to leave for good comes, I will not be afraid, because now I know that love doesn't end with death. He just waits. After the reunions, I returned to the presence of those who were still alive, but now with a different look, not just from those who observe, but from those who understands the pain and the helplessness. I saw my mother standing in front of the stove, stirring the coffee without paying attention, as if the movement was the only thing keeping her going. The radio was playing bass, a song I used to sing in the car. She stopped, stared into space and murmured, "You're still here, aren't you?" Yes, I was. At that moment, I realized how much those who remain feel. Even without understanding, even if I doubt it, the presence of those who left continues to echo in simple gestures, in forgotten objects, in smells, in quick dreams that wake up with tears in their eyes. I went to my sister Rachel's house. She tried to be strong, as always. I was on the couch with my notebook on my lap, organizing the funeral expenses, pretending control. But when no one saw, she clutched the silver ring she inherited from our grandmother, tightly, and cried softly. I approached her. "I sat next to you." I closed my eyes and wished, with everything in me, that she knew I was there. And then, suddenly, the lamp next to it flickered. Just once, fast, but enough to make her stop. She looked around as if sensing a presence and whispered, "Emily." At that moment, something inside me woke up. Souls can tap, but not as you think. They touch the invisible, in the intimate, in the subtle vibration between the physical and spiritual world. Jesus appeared again and said, "It's not time that consoles. It's the recognition of presence." He showed me people around the world having similar experiences. Children who dream of parents who are gone. Women who smell their deceased husband's perfume on special dates. Children who say they saw Grandpa in their room, even though they had never met him. These moments are not imagination. These are invisible touches, brief visits, divine permissions for love to be present, even beyond separation. I also saw that many times we, those who leave, try to console, but we are blocked by pain, by disbelief, by fear. There are those who say, "I don't believe in these things," and that closes the door. But whoever allows themselves to feel, recognizes it. Clara, my daughter, was the one who felt me the most. One night she woke up crying. I told my grandmother that I had dreamed of me, that I hugged her and told her everything was going to be okay. My mother just shook her head. But Clara, she knew, and I knew, in that instant, that my time was running out, not because she was being expelled, but because the cycle was being fulfilled. I had done what I needed to do. The pain of those who remain is real, but it is also a portal, a place where, for a few moments, the two worlds meet. And now, I needed to decide. There came a moment when everything began to quiet down, as if, around and within me, there was a silence full of meaning, a kind of truce between what I was and what I could still be. Jesus looked at me with an expression that was not one of command, but one of understanding. And then he said, "Now, you choose." These words were not symbolic. They were real. He gave me the choice. Move on to the next plan, or go back. My first instinct was to say, stay, there, where pain doesn't exist, where answers flow, where everything makes sense. Why would I go back? But then I saw Clara. She was sitting in my room, hugging a pillow, talking to herself, not as a child playing, but as someone begging to be heard. "Mommy, come back soon, okay?" It went through me, and more than the pain, the question came, is my mission here really over? Jesus did not interfere. He just showed it. I saw scenes from the future, possibilities, paths. I saw Clara growing up, and in a version of life without me, she became a strong but closed-off woman, marked, afraid of loving too much. lest I lose again. But I also saw another Clara, one that grew with my presence, with my love guiding each phase. I saw the two of us laughing in the garden. I saw your tears being wiped away by my hands. I saw the impact of my choice. I looked at Jesus. I didn't ask for advice. I just let him see inside me what I still didn't know how to say. And then, finally, I replied, "If there's still someone who needs me there, then I'll come back." Jesus approached. His light enveloped everything, and before I could understand how, I felt a force pulling me, not in pain, but with decision. It was like being sucked back into my body, but taking with me everything I had learned. In the next instant, a quick darkness, and then a sound. Bip, bip, bip. My eyes opened with effort. Hospital lights, muffled voices, people crying. A nurse shouted, "She's back! My God, she's back!" I wanted to smile, but I couldn't. I wanted to speak, but only tears flowed. And in the midst of the chaos, I saw my mother entering the room. And Clara, she looked at me and said with supernatural calm, "I knew you would come back." At that moment, I knew the choice to return was not just mine. It was the choice of love. The days that followed my return were a mix of miracle and confusion. The doctors couldn't explain it. I was presumed dead for more than 6 minutes. The chances of me coming back without neurological damage were practically nil. But there I was, lucid, conscious, transformed. One of the nurses said to me crying, "You didn't just come back. You shone. We felt it. Something happened there." And it really happened. But how to explain? For the first few days I remained silent, not because I didn't want to talk, but because I needed to understand how to translate what I experienced to a world that is in a hurry, disbelief, and fear. How can I tell someone that Jesus showed me the time of souls? How can we tell that death is not the end, and that, in a way, life only begins when we die? My mother looked at me as if she was afraid to touch me. Clara, on the contrary, treated me naturally, as if she knew, as if I had found myself in that between worlds, and now I was just welcoming myself back. The second night at home, I woke up from an intense dream. In the dream, I was in that corridor of light again. But there were no questions, no doubts, just one sentence, clear as crystal. "Now you know. Share." I woke up with my heart racing, and I understood. My return wasn't just a gift for me. It was a mission. I had been brought back with a message, and this message needed to be spread, told, lived. I started with the people close to me. I told my mother. She cried, not out of sadness, but something that she herself called liberation. I told Rachel, my sister, who was always skeptical. She listened to me with watery eyes, holding my hand tightly. He just said, "I don't know if I believe it, but I feel like you're not the same anymore." It really wasn't. I will never be again. I returned to the hospital days later. Many came to hug me. Others just looked from afar, as if looking at something sacred. One of the doctors called me a miracle. I smiled and said, the real miracle wasn't that I came back. It was what I saw while I was gone. I started recording everything, every detail of the experience, every vision, every word of Jesus. And when I felt ready, I recorded the first video. The hand trembled, but the heart was firm. My name is Emily Dawson. I died, and I came back. And what I saw changed everything. That night, I posted the video without much intention. I just wish someone somewhere would hear it and feel less lonely. But the next day, there were thousands of views, comments from people saying, "I felt something similar. I dreamed about my mother yesterday. Now I believe my father is still close." And I realized what I experienced was not just for me. It was for everyone who is still trying to understand what lies after the last heartbeat. When I published my first video recounting my near-death experience, I had no idea what would come next. Days later, there were hundreds of thousands of views, people from all over writing messages, telling dreams, coincidences, signs, things they never had the courage to talk about with anyone. And I understood. The people believe that love never ends. They need knowing that death is not silence, but transition. And I was there, with a clear mission, to tell what I saw, what I experienced, what was revealed to me. With each new interview, each podcast, each church talk, I repeated a truth that became the center of my life. Souls don't leave immediately. They stay for love, for healing, for mission. And when I said that, something changed in people. Eyes watered, hearts opened. It wasn't about me. It was about us. About everyone who has ever lost someone. About everyone who feels that inexplicable cold in the middle of the night. About those who wake up with a familiar voice whispering in their ear. About those who smell a familiar scent in the air, even when no one else notices it. I began to realize that my story was not an end point. It was a comma, a pause, so that other voices could also be raised. I received messages from doctors saying that they had changed the way they looked at terminally ill patients. From people who forgave family members after years of silence. Of children who dreamed of their parents again and no longer felt fear, but comfort. And all these stories, all these invisible reunions, only reinforced what Jesus told me in the place between worlds. Love does not die. It remains, waiting to be recognized. Today, every time I tell my story, I end with the same question. Not because I have all the answers, but because I believe in the power of asking the right questions. If you died today, how long would your soul stay here? Would you leave in peace? Or would something still keep you between us? If the answer is yes, then perhaps there is still time. Time to love better, forgive faster, say what has never been said, hug tighter, live truthfully. Because in the end, life is not measured by the years we breathe, but for the souls we touch, even after our last breath. If this story touched your heart, then don't let it stop here. Subscribe to the channel right now. Here, we share stories that make you feel, reflect, and believe that life goes far beyond what the eyes can see. And if you made it to the end, comment below. Souls feel. This way I will know that you lived this journey with me until the last second. Leave a like if you felt something true while watching. This really helps the channel reach more people with messages that really matter. Click on the next video that is appearing on your screen. It will move you even more and maybe even change the way you see life.